So, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to a new phase of Emergency Alerting Webinar Series Part 2. IPAWS equips alerting authorities with tools to protect the public. My name is LJ Wilson. I'm the outreach specialist for a team that supports Norman Speicher, who's with us right here, and he works for the Department of Homeland Security Science and Technology Directorate as a program manager. You will hear more from him in a few. Today's webinar will focus on the IPAWS Program Planning Toolkit, which was developed for and by alerting and public safety stakeholders. The toolkit provides guidance in establishing a new alert warning notification program or refining an existing one. Emergency managers, public information officers, alert originators, alerting authorities, and experts all contributed best practices that will help additional agencies jurisdictions nationwide ensure their alert warning notification programs run smoothly. And the goal of the new kit is to put reference tools at your fingertips. So today's webinar will help that goal come true. Next slide, please. So some rules and reminders just to keep in mind throughout the webinar. During today's hour and 15-minute webinar, all participants will be able to type in their questions in the Q&A section. Throughout the webinar, we will also ask you to answer poll questions. My colleague, Josue, will provide more guidance on how to use the Q&A poll section after we go over the webinar rules. As you are listening to the panelists speak and viewing the corresponding PowerPoint, please mute the sound on your computer. We also respectfully ask that you wait until we get to the question and answer section of the webinar for panelists to answer your questions. And most importantly, we want you to enjoy the webinar. That's very important. So please use the chat section to connect and engage in the topic discussed today with your colleagues. And after the webinar, we will send out the slides and the webinar recording in the next several weeks. Now, here's my colleague, Josue, for some additional pointers on how to use the Q&A section. Next slide, please.
Thank you, LJ. So as LJ explained, we're going to be using two different tools that Zoom allows us to use for this webinar. So the first one we're going to be using is the Q&A button, which will show up in the toolbar at the bottom of your screen. Please use the Q&A section to type in any questions you might have while we're going through the webinar. This will help us see all the questions that have been asked throughout the presentation. And when we get to the Q&A section in the end, we'll be able to go through the questions. You will notice that you can also upvote questions. So if you see a question that might interest you or you want to hear, answered, please upvote it because that gets bumped up to the top of the Q&A. And the most upvoted questions will be at the top and will most likely get answered by us as we move through it. The other tool that we're going to be using is the poll function, which is also at the bottom. So a couple times throughout this webinar, we're going to be posting some questions in the poll. So when the poll notification goes up, you may click onto it and the poll is going to come up and then you just answer the poll and then we'll share the results after that section. We were using this to have a more engaging conversation. So we're really excited for your responses to those questions. So I will move forward to the next slide and I'll toss it back over to LJ. Sorry, LJ.
You're muted, LJ.
Sorry about that. Thank you, Josue. Now let's get to our speakers. You will hear from Norman Speicher. He is with the Department of Homeland Security Science and Technology Directorate Program Manager. He has more than 25 years of experience in emergency communications, emergency management, and public safety information technology. Prior to his current role, he supported a range of federal programs, including Science and Technology's Wireless Emergency Alerts and the Federal Emergency Management Agency's Integrated Public Alert and Warning System. In addition, he has acted as the City of Chicago Office of Emergency Management and Communication Program Manager for Northrop Grumman. And he has also worked with the London Metropolitan Police as a police subject matter expert and in a plethora of domain expert and software systems engineering positions as well. So welcome, Norman. We also have here with us Wade Witmer, the FEMA Deputy Director of the Integrated Public Alert and Warning System, IPAWS. Wade has been with the FEMA IPAWS division since January of 2009. The IPAWS division is tasked with implementing an effective, reliable, integrated, flexible, and comprehensive system to alert and warn the American people as outlined in Executive Order 13407. Before joining FEMA, he was employed with the Defense Information Systems Agency for 9 years, serving as the portfolio manager for mobile communications and the Presidential Communications Upgrade Program Management Office. And finally, as the White House Communications Agency Deputy Director of Enterprise Architecture. He also has worked in strategic planning and systems engineering. He has over 19 years in government experience, and he graduated from the Pennsylvania State University in 1991 with a Bachelor of Science degree in electrical engineering. Our next subject matter expert is Jody Smith. She has served as an IPAWS specialist and the IPAWS lab project manager for over 10 years. She was an incremental part in the development and implementation of the IPAWS lab, which serves, all federal, state, local, tribal, and territorial alerting authorities with exercise and training initiatives, along with many other functions in support of the IPAWS Program Management Office. Jody spends much of her time in support of IPAWS efforts and engagements, and often involved in internal coordination with FEMA's National Exercise Division and FEMA's Emergency Management Institute, and external coordination with agencies at all levels. Jody travels the country attending specialized engagements at the request of IPAWS users and the IPAWS Program Management Office. We also have a panel participant who helped us pilot the toolkit over the summer, Carly Tapp, who serves as a program specialist for Amber Alert operations at the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. She will talk more about her role during our pilot participant panelist Q&A section. All of our speakers will help you learn how the IPAWS Program Planning Toolkit is designed to effectively distribute messages that help alerting authorities save lives. Next slide, please, Josue. So let's get to our agenda. Today, we will focus on why alerting authorities need efficient tools, how the toolkit equips alerting authorities to do their job. We will also go through a live demonstration of the standard operating procedure section of the toolkit in action. We will also learn how to not be afraid to push the buttons in times of crisis. And from there, we will engage in a panelist discussion with Carly on her experience using the toolkit, and last, engage in Q&A with all of you. Now, without further ado, let's get to it. Sophie Bennett, who also works with Norman Speicher as the task lead for the FEMA IPAWS Program Planning Toolkit project, will kick us off today. Next slide, please. Thank you, Sophie.
Thank you, LJ. So I'll talk a little bit about the importance of efficient tools, how the toolkit will equip alerting authorities with efficient tools, and then a little bit of a live demo of the toolkit itself. So we've been doing research over the last 4 years or so, speaking with alerting authorities, alert originators, emergency managers, vendors, broadcasters, pretty much the breadth across the United States of folks in these positions. And we've found that alerting authorities need efficient tools to assist public safety agencies in minimizing alerting delays, planning for future alert enhancements, facilitating interoperability across different technologies, and finally improving information sharing among public safety agencies, emergency management, and public safety officials. So if there aren't efficient tools available, we're unable to make sure that our first responders are responding timely and efficiently to the call of duty. So we can't expect emergency managers to adequately protect the public from the increasingly more urgent threat of disasters if they're forced to rely on historical models and experience to do their essential work. So we are here to help emergency managers be armed with new tools and additional resources that use automation and provide assistance to prepare our alert originators when they have to push that button. So DHS, S&T, and FEMA IPAWS understand how important it is for us to design tools that help make life better for emergency managers and the safety of our society. Next slide, please. All right, so like I mentioned on the previous slide, the purpose of this toolkit is right there. We're assisting public safety with minimizing alert delays, planning for future enhancements, facilitating interoperability across different technologies, and also across counties and communities, and finally, improving information sharing. So SMT and IPAWS have been engaging public safety organizations across the nation to ensure this toolkit supports usage across diverse communities. The toolkit itself will help users create messaging templates, standard operating procedure content, and guidance for training, testing, and exercises. At the end of the toolkit, one of the best features is that it pops out a Word document that's totally customizable and will support new and ongoing program planning efforts as a customizable tool. So like I mentioned, there's several different sections. We will get into the standard operating procedure section today. If you attended our previous webinar, we've done a full demo that's available on the S&T and FEMA websites and social media, but I will have Josue switch us over to the demo really quickly here, and we'll get started. Perfect. So it is live. Let's show the FEMA site first. It is live on FEMA.gov. You can just type in IPAWS Program Planning Toolkit. It'll take you right to this page. There's resources on how to sign up if you're not already an alerting authority, how to find that vendor, how to get all the information you need to become authorized. But then there's also the toolkit itself, and we will show the test site so that we don't overload any servers, but it's all free and available on IPAWS right now. So I will have Josue click over to the SOP section, and you'll get to see a little bit of the toolkit as we go through. It's very comprehensive. It talks about all of the different resources that you have available to you, all the tools in your toolkit. All of this that we're passing through is just you're typing in the name of your organization, the tools you use, the purposes, and then step 2 that we're pulling up on right now is the standard operating procedures. So as he scrolls, we'll see that we've got definitions for the 2 different roles, alert originator and alerting authority. So we ask right at the beginning, which position do you have? Are you both? Are you one or the other? And you have the opportunity right at the beginning to start talking about how often you're doing trainings and who is doing which training. So this is more training suggestions. These are pulled directly from, LJ mentioned EMI, IPAWS, best practices, and other requirements to become an alerting authority are included here. We'll start filling this out, Josue, if you want to do some credential management. So something that kept coming up in all of these interviews we did was the importance of having this information documented so that if you are a one-man shop and you get sick or you're not able to come into the office, who is your backup? How are they going to know where your password is stored or how to log in or if that password has expired? So all of this is just contingency as backup planning. Yeah, we can just test. You can see it's super easy to fill out. We sort of call it TurboTax for emergency alerting. So it just walks you through step by step the considerations. And everything here is optional. So if you don't want to fill out password guidelines today, or it's something you want to skip and do later, when you get to the end, it will only show the things that you filled out. So then we get into the importance of roles, the training that role serves, and the schedule for training. And again, this will allow you to add more roles. You can remove. If you're a one-man shop and you become a two-man shop, or if you're even larger, you can add as many roles, training, and schedule as you need. So then this is risk mitigation. So the approval chain of command. So if you have to go through your boss and they have to call the state, or if you're sending an Amber Alert, how does that get done? Who is that approver? How do you escalate the situation? All of that is listed here. We have agreements with other alerting authorities. So if you're on a county line, how is that going to happen between counties, between states? Multi-jurisdictional alerts, if you're wanting to alert a larger area than what you're allowed, who do you have to contact to make that happen? And then, like I mentioned, this is just knowledge redundancy. So if you're not there, who's your backup? How do you contact them? And then if there's an emergency in your office, how are you backing up that data frequently? And then finally here on this last page is your message cancellation strategy, negative impact of false alerts, and some more file storage guidelines and management. Where exactly is your template page located? Where are your training documents and materials stored? And then do you have a message translation plan? Who in your region has special needs or different languages that are spoken, and how are you getting those messages translated in advance? We'll skip next page. I saw a chat asking where this is located. It is currently on FEMA.gov. You can just search for the IPAWS Program Planning Toolkit, and it'll come right up. So then 2.7 SOPs, event codes. So if once you're signed up in as alerting authority, you're allowed certain event codes, and this is just keeping track. You'll know from your MOA if you can send civil danger warning, fire warning, the hazards that happen in your area. So let's click earthquake as well, just to have another example, and we'll keep scrolling. So for each event code selected, all of this pops up as you go. So only the ones you selected show up. And if you're not worried about your NOAA weather or internet services, you can just fill out your EAS alert parameters. What needs to happen for that alert to be sent out? And we'll just keep scrolling. And then you can list broadcaster agreements. So if you're coordinating with your local radio station, how is that information getting to them? Is it automated? Stuff like that. So everything is just saved from the beginning. All right, I think this is one of the last sections of SOPs. This is just a place to put that vendor specific alerting instructions. So whoever that vendor is you use, you can pop in those instructions or where to find them on your computer. All right. Oh, one more, some more testing. So this is just how often are you conducting tests for each system that you chose at the beginning. And then your schedule for talking to Jody in the lab, Jody and her team. What is the date of your monthly proficiency test and how are you accessing the lab? And then finally your audit schedule. So you should be going through these SOPs once a year, once every other year, whatever it is that works best for your organization. All right. We won't touch on this, but this is my favorite part. So if you do click through the tool, we have this really cool Mad Lib style message template creator. So we follow social science research to make it really easy for you to create messages in advance. But that is all I have for the demo. I believe I'll pass it over to LJ and we've got a poll. You are on mute, LJ.
Hello, everyone. So we've got the poll up and I already see people are asking or answering the question, how many in attendance have recently sent out an alert using IPAWS? So I'm going to have this poll go up for about a minute. And after a minute, I'm going to end the poll and show you the results. A very active audience, I see. We're almost there. How many in attendance have recently sent out an alert using IPAWS? Yes, no, or never used IPAWS before? All right, so we've got to our minute. As you can see the results, yes, 31%, no, 21%, and we have about 48% who have never used IPAWS before. Thank you. Ready to go. Continue on, Sophie. Or I believe now we go to Jody.
Hi, everyone. So I guess that poll just sort of told the truth about how many folks have pushed the buttons and how many haven't. While I know that there's always going to be some tension and some stress when it comes to pushing that button, we try to put enough things and enough guidance in place to help you along to ease that tension when the time comes that you need to activate a live IPAWS. Some guidance that I'd like to provide, and that, technology is always changing. These software products are continually making improvements. So it's very important that you familiarize yourself with your software and continue to familiarize yourself. And you can do that through regular training, using the IPAWS technical support services team, doing refresher trainings. We know that employees leave, this industry does have high turnover. So there's always, a need for training. We also know that a lot of folks, when they leave, that they take a lot of that institutional knowledge with them. And there may have been only a few folks that were used to, capable of using IPAWS and very familiar with it. And that doesn't always get passed on. So training, can't preach that enough. Practice, exercise and drills, participate in exercise and drills. Yes, you can use IPAWS in exercises. It does not need to impact the public. You can use the lab environment, which is closed. We are more than happy to assist you with that. All levels of exercises, so please keep that in mind. And of course, please complete your monthly proficiency demonstrations. It is a requirement. Please keep in mind that if you do activate a live alert, it does not account for that monthly proficiency requirement, okay? And that is because that we monitor the lab environment or the technical support services environment for who is doing those tests there. We're not monitoring the live environment. So please keep that in mind. LJ, I think next slide, or I think you're going to do a poll here.
Yes, I am. So we're going to our next poll question. Stop sharing that one. And our next poll is, have you faced delays in alert being sent to the public? And we've started it. Yes or no? At 1:23, I will end it. Again, have you faced delays in an alert being sent to the public? Yes or no? All right. Getting a lot of no's. We again have a minute. Have you faced delays in an alert being sent to the public? Yes or no? We even have some people making comments in the chat section. Almost about to wrap it up. All right. I'm going to end that poll and share the results. So 37% say yes and 63% say no. So go ahead, Jody, and continue on. That's interesting. If you want to talk about that a little, you can.
So I do find that poll result interesting because I have learned over the years and heard from many folks out in the field that the delays in getting or activating public notification sometimes and most oftentimes is directly related to the procedures, the approval process for getting that alert out. Everyone's the same. So again, following on or procedural, try not too wordy and update when necessary. Again, that software is changing, technology changes, your procedures may change. I know that this is just one of other responsibilities, but it is important just to keep up with all of the procedures and processes to get these alerts out. Build templates if your software supports it. Most of them do, some of them don't, but I'm a big supporter of templates. I see that I'm cutting in and out. I just got notification that my internet's unstable. How are you over there, Wade?
Good.
Okay, definitely use IPAWS, the technical support services. We are 24/7 now. available to you at all times, available for technical troubleshooting, support with live alerts, support with monthly proficiency testing, and everything else. If it's IPAWS, you can get in touch with us and we will make sure that we assist you. If we can't assist you, then we're going to get you to the right person. And again, I'm still cutting in and out. Well, I'm going to wrap it up here real quick. Also, that employee accountability. I know a lot of folks, I've heard that, people have put in place these monthly proficiency requirements, but also holding different employees accountable, that when they are on duty, that they are taking turns doing these testing with the lab. Just keep that in mind because it is important. And hopefully a lot of this advice will help you not be so afraid to push that button. LJ.
All right, so now we're getting to our pilot participant experience, where we're going to have Norman lead this section. Our pilot participant is Carly Tapp, and our panelists, our subject matter experts, already have their questions ready. Norman, I'm going to take it away with you. Norman, are you ready to go, or do you want me to say your question? Good. All right.
Appreciate it. I'll start things off. First of all, I want to thank Carly for joining us today. It's always good to get firsthand perspective. So I want to start the conversation off just by asking you to tell us a little bit about yourself and about your role at the National Center of Missing and Exploited Children.
Sure, and thank you guys for including me in this conversation. It's really exciting to get a chance to talk about Amber Alerts and sort of our niche role in the alerting sphere. But I've worked at the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, also called NCMEC, for the last 14 years. And most of that time has been spent in support of the Amber Alert work that we do at the National Center. So my background is in psychology and forensic science, but I found my way to NCMEC and have been here ever since. The call center really does the bulk of the work we do to support Amber Alerts. So they're there to send information out to amplify Amber Alerts through something called Amber Alert Secondary Distribution, which is our network of partners, federal agencies, private companies that need geographically targeted alerts that have been vetted. The other role that we play and have since, IPAWS went live back in late 2012 is that we help to facilitate Amber Alerts through WIA messages for a large portion of the country. Up until I would say about 2017, 2018, we were issuing almost all of them. And currently we issue just a little bit more than half of the WIA messages used for Amber Alerts in the United States. But yeah, the call center is there 24/7 to support any Amber Alert coordinator who needs our assistance. And because of that, we're also pretty connected to what's going on in the alerting sphere as it relates to other types of missing persons alerts.
It's interesting to know. I didn't realize that you've been effective in terms of pushing those down to the local jurisdictions to a much greater extent. I want to ask you a little bit about your experience using the tool, or piloting the tool, I should say.
Yeah, I thought it was really interesting because it provided awareness that I didn't have. We're a nonprofit organization. We're not an emergency management organization. And while we do have folks with that experience and that background, getting that glimpse into what industry standards are and what information should be documented, and really asking all of those questions was validating that we, were doing the right things with our call center, that we weren't really missing anything major, but there were small things that I became aware of as I worked through the tool about, how to present this information. I really liked how flexible it was because, like I said, we have this very niche role. We don't touch a lot of emergency alerting systems, but we can still take this template that was spit out and create a document that's really helpful to provide, clear historical documentation or training information, whatever we need, and we can make it whatever we need. So for that reason, I just found it extremely helpful.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
So now we'll go to Wade. He'll begin his questions.
Thank you
Wade.
for coming off mute there.
Yes. Thank you very much, Carly, for joining us. And you've been a great partner and helped us with a lot of things as IPAWS has evolved, like you mentioned, since 2010 to 2012 timeframe. So we really appreciate that. And my question would be, you kind of talked a little bit about how you at the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children would use the toolkit. And do you see that it could be helpful for the states or even in some cases local AMBER programs as they work through their processes to become an AMBER alert center?
Absolutely. I think that's really where the tool shines, because not only does it allow for flexibility for an agency of any size? We've got state level plans. We also have these regional plans, which require a lot of agreements and MOUs between different law enforcement agencies and different counties. So it provides that tool set that they can use to come up with their documentation. But it also is flexible enough that they can incorporate other types of alerts that these agencies might be using. I mean, I think a lot of people think of AMBER alerts, but those same folks are the ones issuing silver alerts and endangered missing advisories, and green alerts, in some states, blue alerts. So it gives enough room to incorporate all of that depending on what the plan needs. And it also allows to add documentation for things like those MOAs or MOUs that might exist between different law enforcement or alerting agencies.
That's great. I also wanted to ask too, like, what would you think, could the toolkit benefit even in a larger audience within the AMBER community or even other stakeholders that you engage with that we typically may not, especially on the emergency management side?
I mean, I think that most of the AMBER Alert programs over the last 25 years have developed pretty organically, and that's really great. They're very innovative. They're quick to adopt new technologies. But what ends up happening is that you are working with multiple agencies and multiple procedures and alerting resources, a lot of which have very disparate processes and procedures that have to be followed. So, having that solid documentation in a central place and easy to update, easy to change is really important to program stability, but also transitions as people leave. A lot of AMBER Alert coordinators have sat in that seat for a very long time, and it's very intuitive in the community after a while. So providing that knowledge base is extremely important to keeping these alerts going out quickly and efficiently where, minutes and hours matter.
Thank you very much. Those great answers.
Hi, Carly.
Hey, Jody.
I have a couple questions. Mine is about, you touched a little bit on it, but mine is, as you know, I'm always interested in the technologies and the new technologies that help you amplify the AMBER alerts, because I know you rely on a lot of the big companies out there. Where are you with that now? How many are on board and how quick are they redistributing your AMBER alerts?
I mean, in terms of our secondary distribution system, I think we are about 100 partners in the program history, bringing on new technology like intelligent license plate readers, and finding new ways to get that information in AMBER Alert seen by the public or processed by new technology. But honestly, a lot of the technology focus has been on the use of WIA in the last few years, specifically increasing the speed and the ability to, reach people directly where they are is always the goal. And WIA outshines most everything in that aspect. And so one of the things that I've seen in terms of harnessing new technology is the use of URLs and really creative use of social media to enable people to send a text to millions or a message to millions of people, let them all click that link and not take down a website because they get redirected to a social media profile. And it's been extremely effective with the states that have implemented it, to the point that I want to say about, it was about 35% of the AMBER alerts last year sent through WIA included a URL. So it's a pretty large number, and it's been growing for the last few years. The other thing that I've seen a lot of are the AMBER alert coordinators, now that they're comfortable with WIA and the power of playing more with the ability to localize the alerts, using it for situations like children missing with autism, where you really need a highly localized message to get out as fast as possible, because you're dealing with like these environmental risks where a child might drown or put themselves, in physical danger very quickly. And so having the ability to use WIA and the comfort to use WIA in those situations is really important, and has been demonstrated in multiple states to be really effective in bringing kids and adults home in these situations. And then beyond that, they're just using them for other missing person situations, silver alerts. There are several states that use them pretty effectively. And what I do hear, even though we don't track the data for these cases the way we do for Amber Alerts, is that overall they achieve the goal of bringing these people home.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, as you know, we're big supporters of including a URL just to social media because of the amplification of the messaging. And, that's definitely been witnessed by several state users who issue Amber Alerts also. One other question for you. You bring up WIA, and, we know, you rely on WIA quite heavily. When do you think you'll move to start using 360 characters?
I believe several states are starting to move in that direction. I don't have a good feel for best practices yet. It seems to be following typical EAS messaging in terms of what is placed, higher in the message. It's really effective, or it seems to be very effective in situations where maybe they don't have a license plate, but they want to be able to ascribe damage to a car. There was an alert last week. Well, it didn't become an Amber Alert, but that was exactly the dilemma. They needed to find a way to get this information out that it had a very specific sticker and very specific bumper damage. And that becomes a unique identifier that people can look for in an Amber Alert. So I think there is a movement to go there, but also, URLs still kind of set the gold standard because it also enables them to get the photo. So I think we're going to continue to see both.
Great. I'm glad to hear that. That's all I had.
And now we go back to Wade for our next to the last question before we go back to Norman.
Found it. So last question for me would be really, Carly, where do you see alerting going in the future? So probably on a technology side, mostly is what's important for us to lean into to ensure that we can still get emergency alerts to people in the near future and middle future.
Well, I mean, I think in the short term, URLs. I mean, and I feel like a broken record saying that, but it really does capture all of the most important aspects of an Amber Alert: getting that photo, getting that license plate, getting those descriptors. I mean, Amber Alerts tend to be very information heavy. Getting that information to the public in a digestible format is really important. But that being said, I think that when we're looking longer term, one of the really important areas to focus on is improving the speed of communication between a local investigating agency and their Amber Alert coordinator. So, we've heard talk of some states using things like real-time crime centers to improve that communication. I know that there are other tools on the horizon, but finding ways to make it very easy to submit all of that Amber Alert or other alert request information to them so that it's very easy to process and then get it out to the public. The other thing that we've heard a lot of talk about and seems to be worth a lot of focus is just continuing to improve venues and avenues for delivering rich content directly to users. So, not only streamlining the existing alert resources, but, finding ways to add more rich content through traditional channels like broadcasters who have been part of Amber Alerts, for the history of the program. And so using new technology to improve those older tools like EAS or what, the next generation of that tool is very, very important.
Okay, I definitely appreciate that, Carly, and all the questions. I want to open it up to everyone who's attending. So let's get back out to all the attendees. Please give your questions to myself, Jody, Wade, I encourage you to direct it towards the Q&A panel so that we can collect it. And if we don't happen to get to it within our allotted time today, we can answer it offline and make sure that we get back to you. So LJ, do you want to facilitate the questions? Would you like me to do that?
Hi, Norman. So I'm going to help facilitate this section for you guys. So one question that we have in the Q&A panel for you guys is, why do NCMEC Amber Alerts on IPAWS still not use 360 characters? Those extra characters will allow you to add far more valuable information versus just copying the 90-character condensed text.
Actually, our messaging is entirely dependent on an Amber Alert coordinator. So we like to use the analogy, think of us as a letter carrier. They give us the text and we send it out. Now, like I said, it's beginning to be picked up by the Amber Alert coordinators. We have a request process by which they can send us those requests for 360 characters, and we're having continued conversations about when those would be beneficial. But yeah, we actually don't decide the final text. It's all approved by that Amber Alert coordinator. Obviously, we will advise, but things like getting that license plate out and getting that URL out allow people to see the full alert. If you can get somebody's eyes on a photo, that is incredibly valuable when you're looking for a missing person, and getting that license plate allows people to really narrow in on a specific vehicle. So slightly different than other types of alerting. But yeah, I mean, it's absolutely a consideration and something that we're talking about with the coordinators.
Thank you, Carly. The next question in the Q&A tab is there a difference between adding a URL in the free text of an IPAWS/WIA versus adding it in the URL field provided by some IPAWS vendor tools?
I wouldn't actually be able to speak to that. That
Yes.
might be a Jody question.
Yes, so I'll take that. So if you want the URL, you want a clickable URL or a clickable phone number to appear in that WIA on the handset, then you're going to want to put that URL in the free formed WIA text field, not in the URL field provided by the vendor. Software that's specific to vendor and their mass notification.
Sorry, I think, Jody, you're cutting in and out, and I see you, Wade. I don't know if you're trying to talk. Do you want to answer something, Wade?
Well, we're both off of the same hotspot, so I'll take a shot here quick, see if it's my laptop or Jody's laptop. But yeah, so if you want the public to see a clickable URL on the message that comes to their phone, in their wireless emergency alerts phone, that URL needs to be in the text of the message. The URL that is also pushed, that can be pushed through IPAWS in the other field, is kind of a reference field for systems that are actually displaying the alert. So in some cases, a EAS vendor, it's not part of typical EAS, but an EAS or a redistributor vendor can access that URL and provide additional information, but that's not widely implemented most places. So really, for the public to see that URL, the text that needs to be in the text, the WIA text of the message. Did I freeze too?
No, thank you, Wade. The next question on here, in the event the AA has lost internet, is there a way to get an alert out using an alternative path? For example, CISA shares radio network.
Wade, I suspect that's you as well.
Yeah, so yeah, thank you, Mike. That depends, and that's part of using this toolkit to develop a process and procedures and think about those things ahead of time. So at the IPAWS office, we do have a 24-hour service that should local access is becoming a challenge, we may be able to support. Before you end up calling the IPAWS office, we really recommend that you also have a backup plan. In some cases, a state may be able to assist with pushing an alert for an authority that's having problems with internet access in their local area. And if there's internet access everywhere, yeah, maybe at the bottom of that line is partnership with your local. What do you call these guys? The local HF radio folks. So your civilian radio pieces is a way to move messages around your area or the country to potentially get them into maybe a radio station that is still broadcasting or on the air in the event that we're in a disaster scenario, such as that the internet may be out or other communications means. So the important part is to try to make those connections ahead of time and kind of run through those processes ahead of time, work your way through that toolkit and say, hey, in a scenario where I don't have internet access to send my alert, what would I do? And then work from there. So.
Thank you, Wade. The next question we have, how long should it take for an alert to be sent out between the start note of an event to the actual sending of the alert, and what should organizations aim for?
Wow, that's a tough one. I'll just say it as soon as possible, but not sooner than the ability to craft an alert that will be effective at managing both trying to help people, get people out of the way of a disaster, or giving them relevant information about what to do. You know, and I'll couch that by saying sometimes the public, if they just get a message that they know that an authority knows that there's an issue, can really go some ways towards helping manage the public and bring them in and let that, helping them stand by for information later. As an example, I recall we were talking about earthquake alerts. This is before Shake Alert. And the general consensus was you can't send an alert before an earthquake because the earthquake happens before anybody knows about it. And so the opinion of a panel that I was on was that we would never ever send an earthquake alert. And I had an emergency manager, I think he was from the state of Washington, actually stand up in the audience and say, that's not true. And he said that there was an earthquake in Washington state. This is way before IPAWS. And their 911 lines were jammed with people calling to say, hey, was there an earthquake? What's going on? And in order to relieve the pressure on their 911 systems in the whole state, they actually activated the emergency alert system and put out a message that simply said there was an earthquake centered in this area, and response activities are ongoing. So not really a warning, but that was used as, he's like, yes, I sent an alert for an earthquake after the fact that the earthquake had happened, in order to manage the public, let the public know that we know there was an earthquake and we're working on it. And that relieved the pressure on their 911 call system so that true emergencies could get through when they were needed. So that's a tough, it's a situation dependent, really, Olivia, for that one, it depends on what's happening in your area at that time.
Thank you, Wade. The next question we have, I utilize Code Red to manage IPAWS and do not have the ability to launch messages via the mobile app. Is this Code Red specific or universal? If so, are there any plans to develop this capability?
Question.
Yeah, that I'm not sure of that. Jody just told me that that's a question we'd have to go to Code Red about. So don't know.
Thank you. One other question we have in the chat. What are recommendations for older EAS participants, broadcast, i.e. Hurricane Katrina, to review local MOUs and access the broadcast facilities redundancy when WEP is wiped out?
Yeah, I think I'd encourage and really even a coordination. So the EAS is there. Broadcast, especially broadcast radio, is something that is very resilient and makes it through many pieces, many disaster scenarios. So in a situation where you have a lot of things down, you know, you may not be able to use your IPAWS to get a message out to EAS. I think it's important to still maintain a relationship with some broadcasters, the local broadcasters that are in your area, and kind of a backup plan for how you can contact them to have them put emergency information on the air. Typically, your broadcaster can actually activate EAS from the devices that are at that station, or even in situations where, you have a large impact, a lot of the public may be tuning into radio if there's nothing else that's available. Just having a person go on the air and talk about what's going on can be just as effective as actually activating the EAS. If they activate the EAS, of course, that will get to other stations. That will create the over-the-air daisy chain if the station actually activates their EAS. So that's something that needs to be considered for your planning purposes as well.
Thank you, Wade. I think we have time for one more question, which we have here in the chat. Are there any plans in place to prevent an unauthorized access to IPAWS, which could be used to cause mass hysteria?
Another part for your planning is use effective passwords and keep that password protected. And I think it's important to know that local access, remember, IPAWS as a system keeps the alerts specific to a geographic area. So, but if a local authority or a regional or state authority loses access to that or loses control of that password and somebody else sends a message through them, we will not allow that message to go broader than the jurisdiction where it is. The system won't. But if it does, right now our mitigation is that as soon as somebody calls our 24-hour service, we can turn off that certificate or that account that has been lost. So really, again, this is important. It's important for planning. It's an important thing to keep in mind is, the mitigation is to be aware of who has access to that alerting system for your jurisdiction and to protect that access and maintain awareness. And if there is an alert that is not valid, quickly turn off that cog if we think that the access has been compromised. And then we would have to send another alert to say that alert was not bad. So what do you do to retract or to counter an alert that has been sent? Should be part of a planning process also.
Thank you, Wade. And we actually received two quick questions in the Q&A about NOAA alerts and NOAA weather radio connection. I think he was questioning for the previous question about recommendations for older EAS participants.
Yeah, your EAS, almost all broadcast stations and EAS participants will typically be monitoring the local NOAA weather transmitters. So the local NOAA weather radio broadcasts. So coordination with your weather forecast office, they can issue an alert for you. And that's usually a personal connection that's done via phone calls and fax or other local procedures to have them actually send an alert over NOAA weather radio that will then get into the emergency alert system get into those stations that are monitoring those local transmitters. There is also online today, the NWIM, the non-weather emergency message support by NOAA is online, so that if your tool is supporting that and you click to send your message to NOAA, that message will be delivered to the local weather, to a system that's at that local weather forecast office. That still takes a person that's working there to see the message in their system and then approve it and click it to send it through for broadcast out of NOAA weather radio. So there's a couple of ways to get to that local weather forecast office, and always, as always, encourage local coordination with that local office because they're very supportive, but they need to know who you are, and it's better to make that introduction with them before you're in an emergency situation.
Thank you, Wade, and thank you for everyone else on the panel for this very interactive Q&A section. I'm going to toss it over to LJ. We have one more polling question for the group, so LJ, take it away.
Hello, everyone. We've got one more polling question. I'm going to launch it, and here we go. Have you used the toolkit yet? Very important. Yes or no? Have you used the toolkit yet? If not, I'm encouraging you to do it as soon as possible, or at least practice on it. And so far, about 11%, no, 89%. Yes, 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 you guys got to get on it. Have you used the toolkit yet? The most important question of all. Yes or no? All right. Giving you some more time. And now we're going to wrap that up. Going to share those results. So about 11% yes and 89% no. So we're going to really encourage you to make sure that you use the IPAWS toolkit, and Norman will have some more information on that in a little bit. So Norman, I'm going to go ahead and toss it back over to you.
Next slide. Perfect. Thank you, LJ. So I would ask that you please continue to join us for this webinar series, a new phase of emergency alerting. Our next webinar is scheduled for May 5th from 1 o'clock to 2:15. It's entitled How to Minimize Alerting Delays. Also, if you want to pilot the FEMA IPAWS planning program planning toolkit, please contact me directly. My contact details are on the slide here. I will get you in touch with our support team and make sure that we give you that you have access and ample opportunity to utilize the tool. So our team will send along the slides, as LJ alluded to. Our team will send along the slides and the recording to everyone who joined and registered for the webinar today. And we definitely thank you for joining us and hope that you enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks very much. Thank you, panelists.
I'd like to thank all of the panelists for joining us today. And we look forward to seeing you in May for our last webinar of the series. I will now end the webinar. Hope to give you back your time. Have a great afternoon, everyone. I hope you enjoyed this webinar as much as we did. We enjoy engaging with all of you. Thank you, Wade, Jody, Norman, Carly, Sophie, and my colleague, Josue. We're going to do this again in May, so get ready. Have a good day, everybody.
Thanks, LJ.